ready to see something extraordinary? Something like you may never have seen before, brought to you by a duo who describe themselves as broken folk, and their name, Lunatraktors. Welcome to Tuesday Folk People, a series that delves deep into the heart of folk music, exploring the artists at its foundation.
Hello, Lunatraktors. How are you both doing? Nice. Just before we go into your first song, I'm curious about where the name Lunatraktors came from. What does it mean, and how did you come about it?
Before we got the band together, we were in a bar in the Czech Republic where we met actually in about 2013. And we were discussing the fact that whenever we played together or individually, we used to attract crazy people, loons. So it is the act of lunatracting that is and we do like the moon. We love agricultural vehicles.
Soviet agricultural vehicles.
Yeah.
We like this sense of anachronism, that kind of idea of futures of the past or pasts of the future, that kind of thing. So it was, it's hard to find band names. And so we were having this conversation, and everyone around the table, we were there with our friend Justin, and everyone around the table kind of looked at each other and was like, Lunatraktors, that's a band. That's a band name. So,
but then that was kind of shelved for about 4 years. We went around the world, did separate weird things, and then came together in Margate to make the band, and knew the band name already. So it was good.
So the band name before the band. Very interesting and unusual, actually. It's not normal. Great. Let's go for your first song now, which is Anemoia Funk. What is this song about?
Some of it's, well, do you want to describe what Anemoia is?
Yeah, so there's a great project called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, which is kind of based in, there's a kind of vogue online for unusual words. And this is a kind of project where a guy is putting together unusual words for things that he thinks that there needs to be words for. And Anemoia was about is what he describes as nostalgia for a time that you've never known. And maybe nostalgia is always a little bit like that, but we felt like that's quite resonant for folk and folk musicians who are often, let's say, look at the past perhaps with rose-tinted spectacles. Our work is not like that. Our work is very much about colonialism and the horrors of transportation, and we're not really the brutality of the past and the present. So we don't really believe in that kind of, things were better before and they're worse now, or things are better now and they were worse before. We're not really about that kind of linear stuff.
And Anemoia, the first version was on our second album, The Missing Star, which was kind of as if you were driving on a car, driving in a car and coming across some kind of ceremony and going past it. So it was a very short piece. But then in performance, the piece has transformed a bit. That's why we've brought the funk to it as well, because then we've now started to do it wearing the costumes or the entities that you will see in the piece, which gives its own challenge of the logistics of how to actually play drums when you can't see the drums. So we'll leave that to you to show.
Yeah, we won't say too much more about it.
Hi. We're Lunatraktors. Welcome to our home.
Unlike a lot of folkies whose interest in folk music passed down like from their generations, from their parents or grandparents or whatever, you both found the genre by other means. How did you both first get into folk music in the first place?
I listened to quite a lot of Irish folk music when I was little. My dad's mum was Irish, but left Ireland, cut all ties, refused to allow any contact with the family there. So my dad, when we were little, drove us around Ireland in a camper van, looking for roots. So I did grow up with Irish folk music. I came to folk music because I was doing a project about museums. My PhD was about museums and about fiction. And I kind of came to folk music as the opposite of a museum. So it's not about fancy people, and it's not about objects, and it's about traditions that you maintain through doing them. It's about kind of intangible heritage, but the fact that can last as long or longer than objects. There are some amazing First Nations Australian songs and dances which are about geological events that happened 20,000 years ago. So there is it's a real thing.
Yeah.
So that in a way the oldest museum is a dance. So I was thinking about those things, and I was also thinking about what music to make. I'd finished a solo album, which is how I met Carli. Carli did the percussion on that record, and I wanted to to start looking at new material, but I also wanted to have material that was from my family history. My culture. So much of contemporary music is American, and so much of it is kind of more or less appropriated from Black America, and I wanted to find something that I could feel was my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to find these stories from England and Ireland and Australia. My mum's Australian. And I also wanted to tell the truth about British culture, and that's a horror story.
Yeah.
That's the truth of colonial atrocity, repeated colonial atrocity, starting at home and moving out across the world. So those stories of transportation and how brutal Britain was to its own most vulnerable people, and how that was the kind of seed capital of colonialism, that was the story that I wanted to tell. So I started singing these songs, and then when we got the band together, that was the basis.
Yeah, that was the basis. I think my background was much more in performance, in dance, touring around the world with STOMP, with the very big percussion outfit, which was mad for 3 years, and then went to live in Prague. So was absorbing a lot of kind of living and immersing in a different culture. So realizing how folk cultures throughout the world. I then later lived in Mexico, and again you see a lot of similarities in the way people look at object and how they revere certain things, how ceremony and ritual are really, really important in every culture. Actually, there's so many reasons why we always say, well, this is exclusive to this nation, or we're very proud of this because this is unique. And actually, the more that you travel and the more you see around the world, especially with costume, which is very much kind of one of the parts of theatre, is that transformation of self to be different beings or different entities. I think that's somehow where I was coming from a lot, and absorbing when I was a teenager, absorbing a lot of drum and bass, trip hop. I was born in the late 70s, so had that kind of privilege of some really, really quality music.
Yeah.
But folk was one of those palettes that was there, but it was never, as you say, that folk family. I guess flamenco was a big influence.
Huge
at a
for
certain
both of
point
us,
of learning flamenco and learning that form a little bit, and that feeling that you could express so much through that form.
Yeah.
Yes, so it made sense to come together and somehow to be making folk, but that was, as we could term it, broken, somehow
Yeah.
not purist, sense of what form it is, what folk is.
Yeah, it's
Does that seem
anti-national folk
strange?
in a way.
And we are going to
and
explore that. We're going to explore in depth the deeper the sound of broken folk. It's something that I'm hoping that our audience will see and find refreshing, because that's certainly how I find it. It's very different, but also, as we'll learn, not actually that far-fetched from our tradition. But that's all to come. Don't want to spoil it too much. But actually,
Yeah.
Carli, you said something to me about how we often think that we are trailblazers, but in fact, if you look in the past, these past generations actually made the same decisions. They went through the same choices and situations as we did, but we often don't realize what they did and learn from their mistakes. Do you find that in folk music you get to learn from these mistakes? You can find out what they did right, what they did wrong?
I think that's one of the most fascinating things for us in what we do, is that journeying into archive and seeing that these same themes have kept coming back. If only people were able to live long enough to really learn from their mistakes, or to be able to really communicate what could possibly be done in order to be better, or to not make the same absolute carnage, worldwide for generations and generations. In a way, looking back through old text is where you get to see, okay, these things were happening. Actually, perhaps much, much worse, or the way of doing this thing was much, much more savage somehow, just really, really, yes, now we're in new kind of wars, there's new kinds of manipulation, but at that point it was absolute brutality.
Yeah.
And, so is it better or worse? Is it progress? I think that's a big obsession for us, is, we are obsessed somehow with progress and being the best of any generation that's ever lived. And that's an absolute fallacy. And it's very arrogant somehow to think that nobody else, was really trying their hardest as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think connected to that, you can look at it in two ways, and you have to look at it in two ways. You have to look at the past and go, wow, that was really horrible. I'm glad that what's changed. And also look at the past and go, wow, those shoes are really excellent. The design on those are top quality. The idea that we are more technologically advanced is also kind of wrong. We have different technology, but we're not as good at woodworking.
Yeah.
And we're some of the leatherwork and woodwork and textiles from the past, we can't make that now. We don't know how to do it. Like some of the lace making or some of the silk work, where we literally don't know how they did that.
Let's have your second song now, which is Hairs. Can you tell us about this song before we hear it?
This is a song that a few groups are playing. Definitely the best version is Lankum. Do you know a group called Lankum?
I know
Irish.
Lankum.
Big fans.
We're big fans of them. Their version is insane. So good. And actually, it was listening to their version that inspired us to go back into the archives and find all of the different broadside ballads. There's two different versions of the song broadly in the archive. One of them is a song in which the singer seems to be an older man who is exhorting younger men to go out hunting young women, basically.
Nice.
And then there seems to be a kind of alternate or kind of comeback song from the female perspective, which is very much about if young women were hunting young men, it would be a very different kind of mood. So and actually that's something we find in the archive, a folk song archive, a lot, particularly in hints of medieval songs where there were male and female versions, or there was a kind of like battle of the sexes thing in songs from one perspective and another, and it seemed to have been much more balanced. And then you get the sense that a lot of the female songs, a lot of women's songs are missing from the archive. A lot of the songs that got written down were written down by men, and a lot of the versions were written down. And then you can kind of hear this kind of missing. You can read between the lines and think of these missing versions.
The voiceless.
Yeah, the kind of the songs the men were writing songs against. The idea that the men's song came first is also wrong, right? So we kind of borrowed from lots of versions of Hares on the Mountain to keep that hunting imagery going, and to remove the kind of love story from it.
because it's some treatments that we've seen of it, and certainly not the Lankan version, but sometimes it's sung again in that very in quite a quaint twee. It's given quite a whimsical treatment, which you'll see the version that we do, and it's a very, very emotional, very, very difficult song to sing, because during every one, I feel like super triggered. I feel like I want to slay someone. I also want to weep. It's this real grieving kind of song. So after every time we've sung it, you feel that like rise in emotion. When we sing it publicly, people seem to report that it helps them have a process about something, because all this stuff that we don't get to talk about, and this stuff particularly for women and for people of any queer persuasions that are feeling like they just don't get seen, and when they are seen, they're abused, and just taken advantage of, and bullied somehow. So it's really, really powerful kind of purging song for us.
Yeah, it's about violence,
which is still in process, and it is a lot about violence and how we transform that. So our treatment is not a pretty kind of a way of singing it.
I think it's lovely.
Well, you're very pretty also, but I mean, not so much.
So this is our version of a very sung song called Hares on the Mountain. Just leaning into the theme, that all too common theme of misogyny.
If young men could bloom like flowers in the springtime, if young men could have bloomed like flowers in the springtime, how many young girls would go out there and pluck them? If young men could sing like the blackbirds and thrushes, if young men could sing like the blackbirds and thrushes, how many young girls would go beating the bushes? If young men could swim like the ducks on the waters, if young men could swim like the ducks on the waters, how many young girls would take dogs and go after? If young men could run like the hares on the mountain, if young men could run like the hares on the mountain, how many young girls would take guns and go a-hunting? If young men could jump like the deer in the meadow, if young men could jump like the deer in the meadow, how many young girls would take aim from the shadow? If young men could sway like the rushes are growing, if young men could sway like the rushes are growing, how many young girls would If young men could run like the hares on the mountain, if young men could run like the hares on the mountain, how many young girls would take guns and go hunting?
I've watched it several times, but the first time I was like, oh, I'll just pop that on in the background and listen to it. And I couldn't have it in the background. I had to stop what I was doing and like watch it, because it was very, very emotional and quite raw, and it like touched something that you don't usually get when you just have music in the background. And I think that's what you get with your music, definitely throughout. Honestly, amazing, really great.
That might be quite a good conversational point, actually, because that sense of not making music that you can have in the background,
Not
and
generally
the
being a
difficulty of
background
that,
music band.
the difficulty of that, because it's this music that is uncomfortable to have on in the background and distracting. It's not, and that's a lot of music. A lot of music is suitable for putting on in the background when you're doing other things.
Yeah.
Which is essential, wonderful, beautiful, atmospheric thing. But that's not what we're making at the moment. Anyway.
No, not right now.
Yeah.
Looking at the songs you perform, are the stories an important part of what you do? And if so, what kind of stories do you look for in your songs?
The stories are the whole point. But I have a story about that, which is a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with Carli and saying,
"Oh, you're not going to bring this up."
And saying, how much do you think the stories are coming across to people? Because the stories are very important, but the lyrics are quite quick, and the some of the words are quite archaic. The phrasing. And Carli was like, "No, but people, even if they don't get the words, they
understand the gesture.
They understand the gestures that you make. That bit where you're carrying the big stone."
It's not a big stone.
So I looked
at barrel.
So I looked at Carli and was like, "Well, it's a barrel of brandy, and in fact, the entire song is about the fact that it's a barrel of brandy, and it's being whether or not it's being smuggled." So
into a subject.
Yeah, but definitely the story comes first, and then we find the sound from the story. And actually, a lot of Carli's percussion work is sort of narrative percussion.
Yeah, it's kind of, actually that was observed recently when we were in France, was somebody was really picked up on the fact that it's kind of Foley, that the percussion is, as well as being also somehow a bass line, it's kind of melodic, kind of tonal percussion. It's not just providing a beat, as it's also providing a kind of bass line, because we don't have a bass player. And then it's giving that Foley, so it's giving that sense of if we're talking about money or cash, then there's those little chink 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 sounds, and
you do the
certain textures. I don't do the clip clops with the coconut shells, but we should get.
I definitely need to get some coconut shells.
Story is just something so old as well. Something again that links to every culture. Every culture tells stories, and that's how they pass on knowledge. Or that's also how they pass on, everyday information. Everything is coded. Everything is characterized somehow, which helps people to relate to it. I think that background for me in theatre and your sort of much more research and academic based stuff, still that storytelling is just so important for us somehow, giving voice to people who didn't necessarily have that voice.
In fact, I mean, that's the point for me anyway, folk music, and why it's so special is because it is stories of people who don't get to be in books usually. In the past, it is the story of a young woman who is betrayed, and at least in our version of The Blacksmith, we're pretty into a verse in The Blacksmith that most people don't sing, but that we found in the archive versions. There are these references to not only primroses but also to woodbine, to primroses and woodbine, and they don't sound like meaningful they don't sound like meaningful parts of the story until you know that both Woodbine and Evening Primrose are used to have abortions. So
Oh, really?
the point for us in The Blacksmith is that the 9 months reference at the beginning, that there is this kind of encoded message in what has happened to this young woman, and what decision that she's made. And so this sense that folk music can encode the stories that are written out of mainstream history, basically. That's what we believe in. Our work is explicitly feminist and explicitly queer and explicitly socialist and sustainable. And we are very, very kind of anti-conservative, much to the horror of my dear departed grandmother. But
we still fly her very, very grimy British flag.
Yeah.
At some gigs, though, it's filthy and very, very old. We found it in the basement.
Yeah, we did.
After she died, and we carry that with us.
For us, it's all about story, but that doesn't mean to say it's all about language. So we recently performed a lot in France. We performed in the east of Turkey, where none of the audience was speaking any English, and many of them had never seen any kind of sort of theatre. They don't have that tradition there. Islamic culture is not very pro theatre. But people still get it. A lot of what we do is about gesture and about mood and facial expression and kind of emotion. So for us, the narrative is not just a kind of set of facts in a sequence. It's much more about a kind of flow of emotional states. And I think that's one of the beauties of music and movement, that they can tell a story beyond words.
Yeah, and that is the baseline of that is communication, isn't it? We're all trying, or we're all hoping as musicians, as artists, as creators of anything, that we can communicate, that we can make people feel something. Not make them, but try and invite them to feel something. It might not be something that you imagine they will feel, but they're going to emote in some way. They're going to get in touch with something that they haven't quite coped with through their life so far, or and that's somehow, I think, even more necessary since COVID, since everybody underwent this huge kind of global trauma, is that people get to rejoin with themselves and with other people and get to feel stuff and get to go through that and get to move through that vast array of emotions that we all felt and experienced, and talk about it, but not necessarily have to talk about it, just to do stuff that helps us to move through the process.
Yeah, I mean, we come to folk music, me from a literature and contemporary art, and Carli from performance art and theatre, and that's what we do, really. It's something which is a bit like theatre, I guess. Yeah. Every single review of our recent record used the word theatrical. All of them,
even in French.
Even in the French.
So we're just embracing that now.
Yeah. So.
We performed in the Big Top Futzbahn en Fête in the Travelling Theatre in France very recently, in the centre of France.
In the circus.
And we were exactly at home because it was in a huge big tent surrounded by clowns.
Amazing circus.
And we were like,
at last.
This is the life.
Finally, we belong.
Nobody's telling us we can't be what we are.
It was very interesting, actually, when we first started out. We've never been played by the BBC.
BBC Introducing.
And BBC Introducing have ignored us completely. And actually, we sent our music very early on to someone in BBC Kent, who we've been kind of trolling ever since by constantly sending them news, because their response was, maybe it's good live, but these recordings are very good. Of course, that's the record that got onto Mojo Magazine's top 10 folk albums of 2019. So I'd like to believe that several people agree with us that he was wrong, but that sense of what folk music should be or is, I think, is, a lot of people love reverb and guitars.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, each their own, but there is way more to it, which is why having you guys on Tuesday Folk People is so important, because I bet there are a lot of people out there who don't necessarily feel that they can relate to the reverb and guitars, and which leads me very nicely onto talking about the idea of broken folk. If you were to describe broken folk to someone who's never heard that term before, which I feel like is probably a lot of people watching this,
Well, because we made it up.
We made it up.
exactly. How would you describe it?
It just felt like, based on the background of what we'd listened to and that broken beat kind of feeling, that there's constantly a feeling of the beat getting lost or something,
Slipping.
and you know, kind of jumping a beat, not necessarily very clear form structure as the drummer. I don't just hold on to a kind of regimented format. My patterns are a bit longer and kind of extend over a number of bars and then maybe come back to repeat, but also it's always kind of improvised within a certain form. And then that concept for us that everything is broken.
Broken Britain.
And brokenness is okay also, you know, that it doesn't have the anti-perfection thing.
I guess
in a way.
For us it's a kind of the opposite of folk that's trying to be pure.
Yes.
You know, the idea of a pure tradition is fascist. And we are anti-fascists. So the idea for us about brokenness as a kind of mosaic, you know, brokenness as a positive, brokenness as a, you know, as a kind of hybridity and imperfection, and, you know, kind of a set of tiny parts come together rather than these big national homogenized units. So that for us, folk music is all about travel. It's no surprise that some of the cultures with the most vibrant and beautiful music are cultures that are traveling cultures, or cultures that are between other cultures.
And that have been repressed and oppressed by so many other people because they're seeing their freedom of movement, or they're seeing that huge richness in their culture. No, the people are aggressed against when they are somehow flourishing in other ways.
It's about
people
movement.
will be attacked for that. No?
Yeah, it's about movement and flux, and so that for us is about the broken, and the broken as a kind of beautiful thing.
Yeah, because I think brokenness, I certainly think there's many points in my life, like a real crash points in your life when you really do feel broken. You feel that there's no fixing you anymore. And I think people can really relate to that feeling, especially within the climate that we're in now, where it's really a feeling of like, what happens next? You know, what's the next thing in this absurdist play that is the world? You know, where does it go from here? And that brokenness is okay, and we can kind of celebrate how much can emerge out of brokenness. You know, when that concrete does start to crack open and nature starts to come back through, it starts to have, you know, there starts to be beautiful results again. Like the nature will come through all that concrete in the end.
It's hopeful. In the brokenness you find hopes. And you mentioned rhythm and the drums, and I was wondering how important rhythm is to you when you're doing your music as a band.
I'm just sitting here now and noticing that my foot's like kind of quivering in a little rhythm. I tap dance in my sleep pretty much. Rhythm is the first thing that really captured me as a child. I learned to tap dance very, very young, and rhythmicality and music has always been my way, I guess. You know, the drum is actually one of the most primitive of instruments. It's one of the most basic original instruments that would be in every single culture. That and things like the pipe. Yeah, which is for us maybe a real key to our instrumentation, isn't it? Somehow
we're really interested in the pipe and drum thing, which is obviously, you know, people kind of associate folk music with guitars, and guitars are new, and early guitars are lutes, and they're not like what most people had. You know, they're extremely difficult to make, very, very expensive, fancy, courtly instruments. So we're really interested in this. You know, it's almost like if you go and see Morris sides now, they have recovered the pipe and drum to some degree. They're much more likely to be playing drums and pipes. And for us also, that sense that drums and pipes, you know, they've found bones with holes in that play a recognizable scale going back hundreds of thousands of years, and that is the kind of sense that we have about the ancient, that we're really interested in. We really want that brokenness again is about the breaking of time.
Folding.
And the folding, breaking and folding of time, and that weaving together, and that sense that we could do what we do
With nothing.
50,000 years ago, or 100 years into the future, and that it would still make sense to people. That's what we're after. We're after this kind of not timelessness, but timefulness in some way.
When I say
Yeah.
nothing, that sounds like a bit of a weird. I've just contextualized with nothing.
Nothing.
That
we
was one of the base premises of why we started, because we felt like, okay, you see a lot of bands and it's fantastic what they have, but if the lights go off and the power goes down, then there's not much that can be done. There's still the most powerful thing that we all possess is our voice, our body, and to be able to play music just with those very basic principal things that you carry around with you all the time. That if your luggage gets lost, then you've still hopefully got your body and your voice with you.
We carry around a lot of
that
gear
kind of
for a-
post-apocalyptic need.
for a project that started as what can we do just with our voice and our body.
Yeah,
we
we
now
can-
carry around so much stuff.
Well, it's quite a scalable outfit. We can just rock up just us and some shoes that make a bit of noise. Great. Or we can do something very big with a synth and at least a strike pad and
we do the
and
full
projections or whatever
costume
else,
and set
costumes
design
everything.
and
But I think that's
installation and
important
stuff.
to have that kind of versatility now as performers. I think you need to be able to do many different things, as well as all of the other aspects of the business of
admin,
being DIY and
just a lot of
independent.
admin. Yeah.
Promotion, everything.
Yeah, we do everything. So we don't have a manager or a label.
No.
Well, we have a label ourselves,
We are
an imaginary label.
the label.
And we don't have a publisher. We don't have anyone. Apart from our PR guy, our grumpy PR wizard Joe. We don't have anyone in the band, and so we do
like it like
we do
that.
everything. We do the design, we do the admin, we do the booking, we do all of the things, and that's good for us because we're super obsessive.
Yeah.
And that kind of helps us get everything. The whole thing has to be right.
Yeah.
Just going back to the drums and the ancient tradition of drums and pipes and using your body and stuff. Some people may think your music is incredibly revolutionary and unusual and new, but it's not necessarily revolutionary. You're just harking back to a tradition from the past. So yours is potentially more traditional than a lot of the traditional music we hear today.
We're kind of digging. We're going digging. We really have some really bizarre links with archaeologists and conservationists, things like
Museums.
this, and the museum work and the commission work that we do is really that's some of the most fascinating for me. Like the kind of being able to really explore back into the past. We're doing a thing about a Bronze Age hoard at the moment, which is people just put a load of stuff underground and left it there. And then what are the reasons? So everybody tries to speculate, and you can't really ever answer these questions either, because you weren't there at the time. So there could be many reasons why people do things.
The sense for us is it's not about reenactment. It's not about verity. It's not about like this has got to be like documentary proof. It's much more about a speculative past. And we love early music. We listen to a lot of Middle Ages and Renaissance music. We really like music from many, many different cultures around the world. Many cultures have very, very old music traditions. They have, kind of they're still doing their songs that people have been doing for hundreds of years or potentially even longer. And as I was talking before about First Nations Australian people, so that sense of heritage in a big way, but not in a nationalistic way, and not in a perfectionist way, and not in a kind of reenactment way, but in a different way. And a lot of people come up afterwards and talk to us and say that our stuff makes them have a kind of ancient vibe, like they feel transported in some way, or that it feels really old.
Yeah. Let's have your third song now, which is Female Drummer. Can you tell us a bit about this one before we hear it?
Go on.
We are very into songs about cross-dressing or songs about gender non-conformity. there's a beautiful version of this song by the Watersons, and actually the Watersons are a big influence on us, and so are Chumbawamba. I don't know if you know Chumbawamba. They're not the 90s top 10 hit.
Oh, good. Knocked down. Yeah.
Not that one. I mean, good for them, but not that one. English Rebel Songs. That record is a huge influence on us. But the female drummer is a song about a girl who joins the army and joins as a drummer and goes to war and then gets found out and gets kicked out of the military. So I'm trans. I'm non-binary trans. I've always felt like I was having to be in male drag, like dressing up as a boy, pretending to be a boy with all the other boys, kind of like a fox pretending to be one of the dogs, you know. And the horror, the terror of that. But so the thing about this song is that it has a real kind of saucy, like
cheeky.
It's cheeky. We like it.
This is a song called Female Drummer, about dressing up as a boy and running away from home to join the army. The age of 16 when I listed in a regiment to go and serve the king. I listed in a regiment and a drummer boy became, and they learned me to play upon the rubber-dubber-dum with me fine cap and feather. Likewise a rattling drum, they learned me to play upon the rubber-dubber-dum with my gentle waist so slender, my fingers long and small. I could play upon the rowdy-dow, the best of them all. My lads I saw amongst the French, and boldly did I fight me boys, although I'm but a wench. And buttoning up my trousers, how often have I smiled to think I lay with 1,000 men and a maiden all the while with me fine cap and feather. Likewise a rattling drum, they learned me to play upon the rubber-dubber-dum with my gentle waist so slender and my fingers long and small. I could play upon the rowdy-dow, the best of them all. Found my secret out until the very hour that they sent me up to London to be sentry at the tower. And a lady had a feel of me, discovered I was a maid, and she went straight to me officer, and my secret she betrayed. Well, they unbuttoned my red tunic and they saw that it was true. It's a shame, they said, to lose a pretty drummer boy like you. I never can return to my mum and dad at home, so along with my bold comrades, no longer can I roam with me fine cap and feather. Likewise a rattling drum, they learned me to play upon the rubber-dubber-dum with my gentle waist so slender and my fingers long and small. I could play upon the rowdy-dow, the best of them all. ladies and gentlemen, now must I bid you stand and deliver all your valuables to my soft and dainty hand. Or if a female drummer boy's not welcome in the land, well, I'll have to try my fortune as a female highwayman, as a fine cap and feather. Likewise a rattle and drum, they learned me to play upon the rubber-dubber-dum. With my gentle waist so slender, and my fingers long and small, I could play upon the rowdy-dow, the best of them all.
What is it that you're hoping to achieve through your music? If you can do anything with it, what would be the one thing you'd love for it to achieve?
Yeah, I think for me it's that connecting. Yeah. Just the being able to help people to feel something with people. That's been my life in theatre as well. And the music / theatre world seems to be the place where it can happen a bit easier, because theatre's just incredibly still quite hard work in this age, since coming out of COVID, and getting people in spaces is hard. But yeah, music seems to bridge other gaps as well.
I think I think what we want to achieve, we're already achieving, in the sense that this project makes us happy, and it makes other people have great conversations with us, and people invite us to play at their parties, and we get to go, like we just recently went to the eastern border of Turkey with Georgia, with a clown school.
Yeah, clown school from Denmark.
Danish clown school, as you do. And it just, what it does is provide a space where we can be ourselves, and we can explore what that means, and we can open up those kind of moods that we think are important for people, and then people cry and laugh and come up to us afterwards and feel moved to tell us about themselves and connect with us, and they tell us that the way that we are on stage help them be themselves, and that's what it's about for us. That's the point. It's about kind of opening up a space where people can explore who they are, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what good art does as well. Now, when you've had a successful, because we make things as well, when you've had a successful exhibition, because people come up and they share something that they've buried for years and haven't been able to share with anybody, and suddenly they come out with it and tell a stranger about a really, really personal moment and experience. So that, I think that's what all art, what all creativity has the kind of potential to do, is to help us relate to ourselves better, relate to each other, and I think it's just more and more necessary in this time, in this age of madness.
Well, I mean, on that, you said to me before that when you perform your music, it's more like you're going on a journey and you're inviting the audience to join you on this journey, rather than you just presenting a song that you've arranged or written. And in that sense, do you find it really quite emotionally draining to do performing for people? Because especially as you get inside the story of people, as we mentioned before the last song, is it quite tiring?
I think energetically, it's definitely an outpouring every time. I think you get a lot back from it also. I think we feel really that it's most of the time it's a really cyclical kind of experience that we give out. We kind of give out everything, but then we
Yeah.
get back a lot as well. We're both in the process constantly of kind of falling, catching ourselves, maybe not being able to hit that thing this time. Like we're on the edge of what our capacity is, which I think is good because it means we're challenging ourselves and hopefully we'll always get better.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I mean, it's a kind of, there's so much in there which is improvised, and there's so much in there where it's just not actually possible to do it. You know, we're trying to make such a big sound live with
just two
no
people.
pre-recorded elements, with just the two of us. It's kind of like this sort of juggling act, and that keeps it fun and challenging. But yeah, it is tiring. We couldn't do a traditional tour of like 5 nights a week. I think would kill us. Like I don't think we could do that.
We've got to build up to that. I mean, I'm not going to say we can't do that, and I've done it, and it's exhausting when you do that kind of 6 days in a 7-day week, maybe 8 shows. It's doable, but it's a different kind of stamina. Which
Maybe.
Since COVID, we don't. We're building up to that.
We got long COVID, and that sucked. So our energy levels are definitely not what they were. I mean, we could definitely play more. But certainly we like our rest.
Yeah. And I think people deserve their rest. There is nothing wrong with rest, and I think people forget that in today's society and stuff. They just think you have to go all the time. So yeah, rest. I think, Carli, you said to me that British people and culture are terrified of things going a bit feral. And so I was wondering, does this attitude ever affect how people respond to your performances? Do you think that they find it quite a scary experience, or do you think they find it refreshing and freeing?
I did probably say that, didn't I? I'm thinking, did I say that? That doesn't sound like me. Oh no, I think that was me. I do think, I can't really help it. I think there's a kind of compulsion when I'm in front of people, and that's the clown. Actually, that's a clown element of myself. A part of myself is that when I'm in front of people, something just goes, and I can't, I can't filter that necessarily. I can't control it. And so I could, like I have some time in my life, tried to kind of censor myself and pull it back. And I'm like, at the age now, I'm 44 in 2 weeks. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm not going to do that anymore because that hurts me. I'm constantly feel otherwise kind of repressed by myself, anyway, by other people. So I'm just going to let out the things that I need to, which means that quite often in our performances, there are mad screams, weird sounds. We will be emulating if we hear other sounds around us, we'll mirror those. There'll be a lot of banter, and not necessarily just banter about the songs, but just banter between us. And I think what it has the effect of doing is making after the audience are first a bit like, what is this? They kind of, as when they realize that this is what the conditions are, they kind of, you see them kind of strap themselves in and go, okay, this is different. We're going to be going on a journey with these people. And they relax and they actually let go of some of those inhibitions of that normal kind of behavior.
Some of them leave.
Some of them might resist, but mostly they go.
Mostly they don't.
They let go of the feeling of like self-consciousness that they have as an audience member, of their code of what they ought to be doing. And generally we have the audience then bantering back with us and singing along with us or whatever else. So
we also really appeal to small children. They seem to come, and they love body percussion. I mean, who doesn't, right? Toddlers do tend to kind of come to the front of the stage, sometimes even try and climb onto the stage. And we have actually a really broad fan base from like toddlers all the way up to 80 plus year olds. And I think it's interesting because I think lots of bookers, naming no names, are a bit like, our audience can't handle this, but actually, we get great results from audiences.
And I think people underestimate, people that program sometimes underestimate the intelligence and the potential feralness of their audience as well. Like, people do want to go on a journey somewhere. People do want to feel stuff and go a bit crazy. And that's why club culture is what it is. That's why people go to big spaces to rave and release and dance all night. They want to do that at gigs as well, maybe, or they want to have a different experience.
And I think the
risk needs to be taken.
Speaking about whatever British culture is, and it's a lot of things, but there's something about the British where they love to dress up. You know, they love like fancy dress parties is really confusing for Americans. And I know a couple of Americans who've been invited to fancy dress parties and have turned up, and people being
Fancy.
like, "Oh, if you come as James Bond," because that sense of a costume, like the British love that. The denizens of the British Isles love wild craziness, and that kind of pretending. And I think British folk culture is full of costumes and masks and just really wild, weird kind of absurdism, and
which I think is
we
where
love
that folk culture and
that's what it means
the
to
pagan
us.
culture, you know, which is more and more kind of being dug up by people are more and more embracing that, because they're realizing, oh, there's plenty of feralness here. There is plenty within Britishness, within these isles that have been also so responsible for so much absolute bloodshed and terrifying colonialism, and are still nowhere near clean and will never be. But there's a lot of beauty and real horror, but as a kind of a celebration of that horror and that terror in a different way, through pagan ceremony, through ritual, through festival, through
carnival,
communing
ritual,
with the land,
we're into
actually, through really getting back to what nature and its phases and its cycles.
Let's talk now about your albums. How many albums have you released?
We even have them here on CD. This is Claire's first album, called New Myths.
That was all about myths.
Made in 2013. This was an EP, so that doesn't count as an album. This is our first album. This is Broken Folk. We made that in 2019.
Yeah, that's recorded just percussion and vocals
Kind
in a
of
live
documentary,
setting,
live.
no overdubs, no 3 takes maximum, all recorded together, not in no separation. Recorded. It's a live record in that way.
Yeah, and this is the second album that's just of us two. No, the second Lunatraktors album, which is The Missing Star, which was in 2021. So that's where we're at so far.
We've
how do they change over time? How do they evolve, or is it very similar? Obviously, you mentioned the recording process was different, but do you feel like in your music it changed?
The thing for us about folk songs is that there's no limit to how many times you can sing them, and they're always the same, but they're always different. And for us, we have a lot of unrecorded material, and then we also have some songs that we've been singing since the beginning of the project that we still haven't recorded. So both records so far are a kind of two different approaches of trying to capture what we do live. So the first one was like, okay, literally, this is us live. And then the second one was, but there's so many other elements when we do it live, visually and contextually, and there's a lot of gurning and stuff. And the second one is a more kind of like cinematic, trying to capture what we do live by allowing us to put loads of other stuff on it, to do loads of harmonies and play different instruments and stuff. But again, it's just us two. Apart from the strings on one track. But the next one, we're going to do another EP. We've just got some funding from English Folk Dance and Song Society, so we're going to do some research for the next record, which is, I guess, going to be a third attempt, or a third way of trying to represent what we do live, in the sense that it's going to be much more mashup kind of wild craziness as compared to the previous two records. It's going to be much more of a kind of one sustained piece. It's going to be much more like danceable.
I think that's sometimes for us the difficulty with the song. Just and maybe that's the reason why BBC Introducing don't care for us, because we don't make songs that are like just 2.5 minutes and it's nice, it fits neatly on the radio. We quite like making things that are like, this is a minute and a half of something of certain texture, and then we're going to continue for something that might go for about 7 minutes, and then so to be a bit more free with that form of just this is a song, this is a song, this is a song. And the project's going to be called Dancing in Circles, because we've become very intrigued, always have been, by circle dances from around the world, and the feeling that they're a kind of, in a way, a harmonizing of female and male energetic. Like, lots of dance forms have the man taking the lead and the woman going, yes, but I could probably lead better, but no, okay, I ought not to, because I don't want to step on his toes, but he's kind of rubbish, la la la. Anyway, but that kind of gender neutral, opening up that middle other space,
the polygendered space of a circle dance, where you can be anything,
where you can be anyone and anything, and any power,
any animal that you want to be can take part in that circle, that it's open to everybody. So that sense of that, again, like that sense of the ancient, is a big deal. But I guess in terms of the question of like where the music's going and the evolution of the sound, we want to keep that really stripped down duets, body percussion thing going. When we do a live show, some of the pieces are just two voices. Some of the pieces are voices with body percussion and a drone. Some of the pieces have analog synth and 50 percussion instruments and all of this kind of stuff. So we want that variety. Yes. And I think it's not so much about changing the sound. It's more about opening it up wider.
So it's just more paths that you can go down in the end.
Yeah, it's not moving from one place to another. It's about expanding that view. So someone's gonna, building in some stuff which is more experimental or improvisational. That's what we tried to do in the second record, in The Missing Star, where some pieces are instruments only, some pieces are very stripped down, some pieces are just duets, some pieces are much more a kind of traditional song form. So it's a bit of everything.
Yes, great. And so, I mean, we are sadly running out of time. But before we do, you've mentioned a new record on the cards that you're working on. Is there anything else you've got coming up in the future that you'd like to share with the audience?
Maybe the Beyond the Binary piece that we're doing at Gulbenkian Theatre on the 29th of September in Canterbury would be a nice one. Perhaps the link can appear somewhere in this thing later. I think it's actually free tickets, but it's a research project that we've been commissioned into, which is looking into the music hall, panto and variety archives of the Kent Special Collections. I used to do pantomime when I was a young girl, so it's a very dear kind of historical subject for me. And we've kind of identified that we are, in some ways, a modern day music hall act, continuing within a culture, a really, really long heritage of people doing really strange thing on stage.
Double acts. And the idea of the kind of story song, character songs, dressing up.
And finding that within the archive, finding the queerness and kind of pulling it out, looking at a lot of women that were impersonating men and did very, very well, the other, vice versa, and trying to see and discuss and open up in a kind of lecture, performance, concert kind of context, which anybody can come to. That's, what is it beyond those binary places of the pink world and the blue world? What is that other space, and what is it in performance, and what has it been through history, actually? Because we always have some kind of imagination that it's new, that all this gender queerness is new, and it's really not the case.
No, there's a reason that the first thing the Nazis burned was the Gender Institute, right? Because they had trans men and women with, official passports and everything back in Berlin in the 30s. I guess the thing for us that maybe we want to talk about is how much we love working to commission. Lots of institutions, but also people invite us to perform at special events or make something new for them that fits with particular themes. We love researching that and making things for people. We're doing some stuff with a number of different museums. Stourbridge Glass Museum has just got in touch with us, so we've made friends with them. We've just moved to Ireland, so we are going to be European citizens again. I guess it's that. I guess that's the thing that's coming up for us a lot, is working working on research projects with people, Bronze Age axes and
Yeah.
glass and music hall and pantomime and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Is what we're doing. Yeah.
General expansion.
Yeah. And so if people want to either get in touch with you, want to see the projects you're doing, hear your music, just anything, where should they look to find all that information out?
We have we're on all of the socials, but steadily and constantly questioning how good a medium that is and how quickly those things are changing and kind of being taken over by corporations, basically. So the best thing to do is to sign up to our mailing list, which is, that's via Bandcamp as well. If you find us on Bandcamp, that's where we sell
We've
our
got
music.
a website, so
We have a website.
everything's on the website.
Yeah. So you can basically sign up to be on our mailing list. For us, that mailing list is something that allows us to be personally in contact with you. And then we can answer questions, do whatever, but without the kind of the boundaries and the barriers that keep being put up by the algorithms and the socials and everything else. So
yeah, when you
that
post
feels a
it
bit
and
more
only
empowering
you've got
for
4,000
us.
followers, but only 20 people see it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the reality of Instagram.
So yeah, www.lunatraktors.space
Yeah, we'll
is
share
where
that.
to see all of that stuff.
It'll appear on the screen. Yeah, we'll have that for everyone. And also, it'll be all in the description of the video if you want to find
Marvellous.
that. Great. So, sadly, we have now come to our final song. Before we hear it, I do want to say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing everything. Honestly, your music is fascinating. You as people, lovely, great and fascinating. And it's just really wonderful to talk to you. So thank you for joining us today. And then we have one final song, Terracotta Armies. What is this song about?
It's about how the Terracotta Army was made. It's about the fact that excavations have found how many dead bodies were involved, how the production of this army, who made it, why it was made, and the fact it's kind of about museums in a way. It's about the sense that all of these wonderful, majestic things in museums are made with blood, from they're made through oppression, and so that's what the song's about. The song's about the fact that that we shouldn't view these things with uncritically. That we should look at the reality behind things and assess them on that basis.
This is one of our songs, written in the folk tradition, but one of ours, called Terracotta Armies. The master buried with his claim, all around the world the same. The afterlife is what's to blame for terracotta armies. The afterlife is what's to blame for terracotta armies. Batch production, part by part, each stamped by the official clock. Paperwork from end to start, that's terracotta armies. Paperwork from end to start, that's terracotta armies. 700,000 slaves buried living in their graves. That's how bureaucracy made their terracotta armies. That's how bureaucracy made their terracotta armies. But slavery is too unjust a word for government, who must
justify the blood and dust of terracotta armies. The emperor and all his scribes invented work and debt and tithes, paid for with other people's lives their terracotta armies, paid for with other people's lives their terracotta armies. And now the armies Elysians, glorified by all who see them, unseeing in the clay the means of terracotta armies, unseeing in the clay the means of terracotta armies. Bureaucracy 3,000 years has bought indebted souls with fears, keeping always in arrears the fortunes which are owed them, keeping always in our ears the fortunes which are owed them, keeping always in our ears the fortunes which are owed them. And still the world is much the same. Starvation, slavery, and shame, all working in the master's name. On terracotta armies, all working in the master's name, all working in the master's, all working in the master's name, all working in the master's, all working in the master's name, all working in the master's, all working in the master's name, all working in the master's, all working in the master's name. On terracotta armies.
the end.
If you like what you've seen today and want to discover more new amazing artists, sign up to our mailing list, which is available on our website at home-stage.co.uk, or follow us on social media.